As a kid growing up in Israel, a comic book was a great discovery for me. In the Israeli tradition, we didn't have comic books. I think Israelis are too cynical to believe in stuff like superheroes, like men running around in tights, and it's like such a small country that if you couldn't keep a secret identity because your mom will tell the neighbors. So this was my first discovery, but the second and maybe even more important discovery was discovering independent comics, and especially kind of biographical comics which told a life story. And when I thought about reading something here, I actually picked a book, a story, a yet unpublished story. It's from my new collection that will come out in Israel in a few weeks. And it's kind of, let's say, the fiction equivalent of biographical comics. It's like, it may not be factually true, this story, but it is true in the deeper sense. And it's called Suddenly There's a Knock on the Door. Tell me a story, the bearded man sitting on my living room sofa orders. The situation, I must admit, is anything but pleasant. I'm someone who writes stories, not someone who tells them. And even that isn't something I do on commission or under duress. The last time anyone asked me to tell him a story, it was my son. That was a year ago. I told him something about a fairy and a ferret. I don't even remember what exactly. And within 2 minutes, he was fast asleep. But here, the situation is fundamentally different, because my son doesn't have a beard or a pistol, because my son asked for the story nicely, and this man is simply trying to rob it from me. I tried to explain to the bearded guy that if he puts his pistol away, it will only work in his favor, in our favor. It's hard to think up a story with the barrel of a loaded pistol pointed at your head. But the bearded guy insists. In this country, he explains, if you want something, you got to use force. He just got here from Sweden, and in Sweden it's completely different. Over there, if you want something, you ask politely, and most of the time you get it. But not in the stifling, solitary Middle East. All it takes is a single week around here to figure out how things work, or rather, how things don't work. The Palestinians asked for a state nicely. Did they get one? The hell they did. So they switched to blowing up kids on buses, and people started listening. The settlers wanted a dialogue. Did anyone pick up on it? No way. So they started getting physical, pouring out oil on the border patrolmen, and suddenly they had an audience. In this country, might makes right. And it doesn't matter if it's about politics or economics or a parking space. Brute force is the only language you understand. Sweden, the place the bearded guy made Aliyah from, is progressive and way up there in quite a few areas. Sweden isn't just ABBA or IKEA or the Nobel Prize. Sweden is a word unto itself. And whatever they have, they got by peaceful mean. In Sweden, if he'd gone to the ace of base soloist, knocked on her door, and asked her to sing for him, she'd ask him in and make him a cup of tea. Then she'd pull her acoustic guitar out from under the bed and play for him. And all this with a smile. But here, if he hadn't been flashing a pistol, I'd have thrown him out right away. Look, I try to reason. Look yourself, the bearded guy shoots back and cocks his pistol. It's either a story or a bullet between the eyes. I see my choices are limited. The guy means business, and I've got to admit he has a point. We do live in a violent region, and it's time I started respecting that. 2 people are sitting in a room, I begin. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door. The bearded guy stiffens, and for a moment there, I think maybe the story is getting to him. But it isn't. He's listening to something else. There's a knock on the door. Open it, he tells me, and don't try anything. Get rid of whoever it is, and do it fast, or this is going to end badly. The young man in the door is doing a survey. He has a few questions, short one, about the humidity in summer and how it affects my disposition. I tell him I'm not interested in answering this questionnaire, but he pushes his way inside anyway. Who's that, he asks me, pointing at the bearded guy. That's my nephew from Sweden, I lie. His father died in an avalanche, and he's here for the funeral. We're just going over the will. Could you please respect our privacy and leave? Hey, pal, the poster says and pats me on the shoulder. What's a few questions between friends? Give me a chance to earn a living. They pay me per respondent. He takes a seat on the sofa. The Swede sits next to me. I'm still standing, trying to sound like I mean it. I'm asking you to leave, I tell him. Your timing is way off. Way off, huh? He opens his plastic binder and pulls out a big revolver. Why is my timing off? Because I'm darker? Because I'm not good enough? When it comes to Swedes, you've got all the time in the world. But for a Moroccan, for a war veteran who left pieces of his spleen behind in Lebanon, you can't spare a fucking minute. I try to reason with him, tell him it's not that way at all, that he simply caught me at a delicate point in my conversation with the Swede. But the poster raises his revolver to his lips and signals me to shut up. Cut the crap, he says. Stop making excuses. Sit down over there and out with it. Out with what, I ask? The truth is, I'm pretty uptight by now. The Swede has a pistol too. Things might get out of hand. East is East and West is West and all that. Different mentalities. Or else he could lose it, simply because he wants the story all to himself. Solo. But the Swede looks really composed. Don't get me started, the poster warns. I've got a short fuse. Come on, let's have it. That's right, the Swede joins in and pulls out his piece too. I clear my throat and start all over again. 3 people are sitting in a room. And now suddenly there's a knock on the door, the Swede announces. The poster doesn't quite get this point, but plays along with him. Get going, he says, and no knocking on the door. Tell us something else. I stop short and take a deep breath. Both of them are peering at me. How do I always get myself into situations like this? I bet things like this never happened to Amos Oz or David Grossman. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door. The gaze turns menacing. I shrug. It's not about me. There's nothing in my story to connect to that knock. Get rid of him, the poster orders me. Get rid of him, whoever it is. I open the door just a crack. It's a pizza delivery guy. Are you Keret, he asks. Yes, I say, but I didn't order a pizza. It says here 14 Zamenhof Street, he snaps, pointing at the printed delivery slip and pushing his way inside. So what, I say, I didn't order a pizza. Family size, he insists. Half pineapple, half anchovy, prepaid, credit card. Just give me my tip and I'm out of here. Are you here for a story too, the Swede interrogates. What story, the pizza guy answers. But it's obvious that he's lying. He's not very good at it. Pull it out, the poster prods. Come on, out with the pistol already. I don't have a pistol, the pizza guy admits awkwardly, and draws a cleaver out from under his cardboard tray. But I cut him into julienne strips, unless he coughs up a story on the double. The 3 of them are on the sofa. The Swede on the right, then the pizza guy, then the poster. I can't do it like this, I tell them. I can't get a story going with the 3 of you there and your weapons and all that. Go take a walk around the block or whatever, and by the time you get back, I'll have something for you. The asshole's gonna call the police, the poster tells the Swede. What's he thinking, that we were born yesterday? Come on, give us one and we'll be on our way, the pizza guy begs. A short one, don't be so anal. Things are tough, you know, unemployment, bombs, Iranians. People are thirsty for something else. What do you think brought us here? We're law-abiding citizens, you know. We're desperate, man, desperate. I clear my throat and start again. 4 people are sitting in a room. It's hot, they're bored. The air conditioner's on the blink. One of them asks for a story. The second one joins in. Then the third one. That's not a story, the poster protests. That's an eyewitness report. It's exactly what's happening here right now. Exactly what we're trying to run away from. Don't you go and dump reality on us like some garbage truck. I nod and start again. A man is sitting in a room, all by himself. He's lonely. He's a writer. He wants to write a story. It's been a long time since he wrote his last story, and he misses it. He misses the feeling of creating something out of something. That's right, something out of something. Because something out of nothing is when you make something up out of thin air, in which case it has no value. Anybody can do that. But when it's something out of something, that means it was really there the whole time, inside you, and you discover it as part of something new that never happened before. The man decides to write a story about the situation, not the political situation, and not the social situation either. He decides to write a story about the human situation, the human condition, the way he's experiencing it right now. But he draws a blank. No story presents itself, because the human condition, the way he's experiencing it right now, doesn't seem to be worth a story. And he's just about to give up, when suddenly, I warned you already, the Swede interrupts me. No knock on the door. I've got to, I insist. Without a knock on the door, there's no story. Let him, the pizza guy says softly. Give him some slack. You want a knock on the door? Okay, have your knock on the door. Just so long as it brings us a story. Thank you.
I'm going to try to ask questions, hold the microphone, and do the PowerPoint at the same time. Things are off to a good start. That was an extraordinary story, and I actually think that I will depart from the first question I was going to ask and ask something else, which is, I think there's a Yiddish phrase, and I wish I had it complete in my mind, but something like, sometimes we need a story more than a piece of bread, something about the value of a story. And I wonder for you as a writer, and Harvey also, whether writing is something that kind of literally keeps you alive, and also whether our cultures need stories and narratives to keep them alive as well.
All right. I write because I enjoy it, and because, I make some money at it. Shouldn't be overlooked. And that's it,
Okay. Hey, you're free to go. Oh, can I hold on a second? I think, in case this is going to be on TV, can I take off the CJM tag, or do you want to keep it on for?
That's all right. I don't want to get a reputation as being uncooperative.
Too late. That was free marketing. Yeah. Maybe. All right. Well, maybe we'll put it back on later. Is it? Okay.
As you wish.
Any thoughts on the,
Well, I can say that writing for me is kind of his way of being in the present. My parents are Holocaust survivors, and I'm a very, very extremely stressed person. And I think that, there are kind of a number of things that can really make me be in the present, because, even like when I'm here and I'm sitting on stage, I'm thinking about like 5 things I should do and another 10 that I should have done. And I think that basically it sums up to kind of like, I would say, playing with my son, smoking pot, having a foot massage, and writing are the 4 ways of kind of being in the present, and basically, and this is one of the 3 legal ones, and my son doesn't always want to play with me, and it's very difficult to get a good foot massage in Israel, so I'm stuck with writing.
You guys are funny. I want to ask a question about American Splendor, if I could. We have an image of, there are several kind of anthologies. This one looks a little bit like Jack Nicholson in with The Shining. Do you know that film?
No.
No.
I mean, I heard of it, yeah.
Yeah. You should watch it. It's the blood red
I'll
color.
do that.
Well, my question is, in the 70s, you were kind of the innovator of what became the graphic novel, and I'm wondering, as an artist kind of creating art, whether you had a sense that you were creating something that was specific, that was different, that was innovative, or whether you just backed into doing what felt right to you, and on the other end of it, it seemed like it was something different.
All right, I'll tell you the truth. You zog der Emes. I knew what I was doing. And had thought about this for years. I had been I continued to be a jazz critic, but I wasn't, I wanted more praise, you know what I mean, how that is. So, I'd been following alternative comic books for a long time, and I saw where, they were regular comic books, superhero comic books, are pretty bad. And because of that, comics got a bad name, but there's nothing wrong with comics as an art form. It's the people that do all this crap, that, are bringing the thing down. So I sort of was, thinking about this for years about, what could be done with comics. For example, comics at the time, I was speaking about, thinking about it anyway, didn't have a realistic movement. Just about every other art form has a realistic movement. Comics didn't even have realism. I mean, these guys that made comics, for a quick buck in the 30s, they kept on putting them out. They didn't try and get, reach a larger audience. It was just these kids that wanted them. So I thought, there was all these things that could be done in comics that were actually some done in other art forms, and I wanted to try and incorporate them into comics so that, I thought I would be, stardom would follow quickly. So
it followed, maybe not as quickly as you might have hoped.
Yeah, 30 years, yeah, a long time.
Well, we'll get to stardom pretty soon. For those of you who aren't familiar with work, Harvey Pekar has said that he would be happy to read this. I'd always wondered what it would sound like in his voice. And if you can't read it, it says American Splendor assaults the media. So would you mind reading this first page?
Okay, so this is an attack on the Village Voice that I made. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. This is an attack that I made on the Village Voice. I got mad at them. This is just the first page of a searing bunch of criticism here. Okay, I'm sitting there, sweating, with a torn T-shirt on, and just looking crazy. That's the way Crumb draws me. And I say, I know a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy who was a senior editor of the Village Voice. His wife, the editors, got shown my stuff, liked it, and wrote a long article about me, which was actually published. Of course, if the woman hadn't been married to an editor of the paper, I wouldn't have had a snowball's chance in hell of them printing anything about me. Anyway, they passed my books around the Voice office, and I gather I was the hero of the month there. Someone quoted the editor-in-chief as saying about me, "Can we get this guy?" The art director called me up a couple of times and begged me to do a weekly story for them. I refused partly because I didn't think I could meet the deadlines, but I said I'd contribute to him as often as possible. He said that was okay. I told the guys who illustrated my work about the offer, and they were very happy except for Crumb, who was jaded. It was a great opportunity going from practically no public recognition to a paper with a circulation of 150,000 or 200,000, including a relatively high proportion of intellectuals and people connected with the arts. It seemed too good to be true, and it was. We worked like hell and sent the Voice 4 stories in 4 weeks. It took 2 months for the first one to be printed, and 2 more for the second, and then nothing. I called the art director a few times, and he kept on saying the editor-in-chief couldn't spare him the space. That is, he couldn't spare him about 1/3 of a page in a 110-page paper. So, that's what I read it.
Is it fair to say that this is more text than you would find, let's say, on a page of Spider-Man?
Yeah, well, yeah. Maybe not in an atypical situation, but
Microphone. Sorry.
yeah, this is more text than you would find in an average Spider-Man page. Although in an unusual situation, God knows what would happen, You might find more Spider-Man text than my text. It's, that's the way life is.
So Crumb is R. Crumb, the famous illustrator. I imagine most people know him. Famous now, more famous than usual in Jewish circles because of his new illustrated book of Genesis. I think it has an R rating because of all the begats and so forth. So I think we have that in the store too. This is a strip by Joseph Remnant, who is another one of your collaborators. I wanted to talk a little bit with both of you about the kind of the writing process. We'll keep this up for a minute. Maybe Etgar, to ask you. I would imagine your short stories are less collaborative than other work you do. But I'm curious about what the creative process is like to write a story as opposed to working, let's say, with your wife on a film or being involved with TV and so forth. How do you create your ideas in collaboration with others versus on your own?
Well, I love writing stories, but the thing is that when I started writing stories and the stories began to do well, then basically I quit my day job and I found myself very lonely because I would write and most of my interactions with people would be on stage or interviews, and I want to do stuff with people, and that's why I started collaborating on comics and films, and I think that that I won't give up on stories, but there's something amazing, let's say, when you make a film, that when you finish a film and there's a film screening and all the people who made this film, the actor, the cinematographer, the editor, the musical editor, the composer, they kind of all sit in a room and look at the screen, and you look at them and each of them feels that it's him on the screen, that they're all up there. It's kind of like this sexless orgy, It's all those people kind of doing stuff together. And I think that there's something in this process really that it creates a great intimacy, because when you work with somebody on something, then basically you put this kind of something from you on the page or on the screen, and the other person puts something from him on the page or on the screen. So again, it's usually what you do in sex, only without the sex bit, So it's kind of a meeting point in kind of this virtual reality, but it's a very authentic and emotional meeting point. And I really feel that, some of the people I collaborated with artistically, I feel extremely close to them. People that I kind of stopped working with them, but they worked with them in the past. Like when I meet Rutu, it's like meeting my ex-wife. I don't have an ex-wife, but she's like kind of my literary ex-wife, and it's amazing because some of those people I really can't even talk to them about anything. We don't have much in common in real life. We have strong liking to each other, but we have kind of zero communication. And this collaboration offers us some sort of, I don't know if it's kind of a mediation, but offers us this kind of interface to be together.
Would you describe your collaborations with Crumb and others in kind of sexless, orgiastic terms, or was the process different?
I write stories in a kind of a storyboard. I write stories in a kind of a storyboard manner. I divide the page up into panels, and I use stick figures and thought balloons and captions and speaking balloons. So it's, I think that it is gives the illustrator a closer idea of what I want than just like a typed motion picture film script or something like that. You know, I write, and then I talk to them. I talk to the illustrators, and you know, we go over the thing, and I tell them what I'm looking for, like especially in cases where, you know, it's not obvious. And you know, I try and I don't, you know, leave real detailed descriptions of what the illustrations will look like. You know, maybe I'll say, you know, like this happens in this panel, but I'm not saying what they're dressed in or what the room looks like or anything like that. I'd like to leave that up to the illustrators, because as they go along, you know, they may find a better way to illustrate it than I would in the beginning of the process. And that's about it, you know. I mean, then I ask them if they'll send me a Xerox copy of the thing when it's finished, and I look it over, and if I don't see any mistakes or anything like that, then it's a go.
So can I maybe probe a little further into the creative process with something like this? I love this. Maybe I'll just read it. It may not be clear. This is you. So I was writing the story I called Hypothetical Quandary, only I spelled it quandary. I left out the second A. So I sent it to Crumb to illustrate. He sent me back the illustration, which was great, and he also corrected my misspelling of quandary. Nothing gets by him. The thing is, I never knew how to spell quandary right. I wasn't just being careless. And it continues in this vein. My question is, the dialogue that emerges here, is this the dialogue that, let's say, you would give or gave to Crumb, or is there an iterative process where you send it, he sends something back, and you go back and forth, or once you write it, that's it?
Well, with Crumb, you know, Crumb's a sharp guy, and we've been working together for a long time. So we don't go back and forth. I give him something, he does it, and, you know, it's pretty much always, you know, what I want. So I'm extremely lucky to be working with a guy as intelligent and talented as Robert. You know, I mean, your relationships with different illustrators, you know, can vary. You know, some people can do some things well and not others, or, you know, I don't want to get into that. You know, but you know, sometimes you say stuff to one illustrator that you don't have to say to another.
I can say, you know, if I can use your PowerPoint skill, I can even show it, that usually when I write with artists, what button do you press? One of them?
I don't know. Where are you trying to go?
For example, this is from children books that my wife and I did with David Plonsey. He animated Wars with Bashir, and he has a big cat that he loves a lot. And this cat found its way into the story. In the story, it's about a girl who's looking for the moon in a moonless night. So he basically drew this cat that she meets, like, you know, as a full moon and as this kind of moon. And the thing is that I'm not sure that if David didn't have a cat, we'll have a cat in his story. This is, for example, from work I did with Rutu Modan. And Rutu Modan, knowing her, I knew that there were a lot of stuff that she liked drawing. For example, circus. So when I wrote for her something about a circus. Because for me, I think that there's something in comics collaboration. I think it's very different, because when I collaborate, it's not that I have a complete story and I want the illustrator to illustrate it. I almost kind of exploit on the fact that he exists and of my attempt to communicate with him. I think it's a good metaphor for this could be friendships. That sometimes, like, you have friends that you always talk about politics, and sometimes you have friends that you do silly stuff with, you know, and sometimes you have friends that, I don't know, that you like to get drunk with. And basically, you know, you're silly and drunk and interested in politics, but you need those certain friends to take those things out of you. So let's say when I write for Rutu, and I was single at the time, I could write a story about this married woman who's pregnant and has these fears that she will have a monster being born, and this is a story that I wouldn't have written for anybody else because I was never a pregnant woman, but Rutu was. And when I worked with Asaf Chanukah, who's younger than me, and is much more kind of epic in style, then I found myself kind of writing stories that would fit this communication. And it's not as if I was kind of trying to please them, as much as if there was something in their presence and in their dialogue that kind of wanted me to explore that side in me. You know, when I was with Rutu, I wanted to be cynical and funny, and when I was with Asaf, I really wanted to make the world a better place. There is this thing about me, I guess, that I'm kind of easily affected by people.
And Harvey, for you, the stories that you write, do you have an illustrator in mind? And does that subconsciously in any way subtly affect how you write?
Well, I write the story first, and then, you know, I mean, at various times, different illustrators are available to me. So, you know, I choose, first of all, I try and spread out the stories with, you know, so I don't give too many to one person, you know. And you know, I think about, you know, when I write something, then I look at it and I think whose style would fit it best. And, you know, and if he's not available or her, you know, I you know, go down to the next person, you know. But illustrators have different strengths, and I try to play to their strengths.
I want to pull up something with rabbis here. Let's see if I can remember where. Where's our rabbi? Miracle rabbis. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to tell us anything about this?
You know what a yeki is? We had I worked as a file clerk in a hospital for 35, 37 years or something like that. And in this hospital, we had a lot of Jewish doctors that came over from, you know, Vienna, you know, I mean, they were the tops, you know, I mean in general. I'm not speaking exactly of the guys in our hospital who were called the Seven Dwarves. So I used to go like this one guy, you know, and I would deliberately try and I get in a conversation with him that would confuse him or something like that, or, you know, what are you talking about? You know, something like that. So that's just I wrote a few stories about this guy. You know, I got a big kick out of, because he would take me literally a lot. I'm kind of, you know, I got a cruel streak in me, you know. So, you know, I sort of play on that sometimes, you know.
His name was not Dr. Gesundheit?
No, it wasn't Dr. Gesundheit.
As you say?
No, it wasn't actually.
Protecting his anonymity?
Yes, I'm you know, I'm very aware of his anonymity.
I wanted to ask both of you about language, and this may be a good transition. I know, Harvey, Yiddish was a language that you spoke and knew growing up. And you had mentioned to me yesterday or the day before about you wish maybe that you had spoken it over the years, and that kind of hearing it gives you a kind of a warm feeling or something like that. Did I catch that correctly?
Yes, you did. Yes. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was, you know, all my parents and and all my uncles and aunts and even some of my cousins were from Poland. And they all spoke Yiddish, and I spoke Yiddish with them, except that the guy that I spoke most of the Yiddish to was my grandfather. and he died. The other people were always working and in a rush, and so, and then, you know, I didn't realize what Yiddish was going to mean to me, you know. Everybody wanted to speak English and, you know, be, you know, like an American and stuff like that. So I didn't, it just slowly dawned on me, you know, that Yiddish, you know, meant a great deal to me. And so I got back to, you know, I never could read Yiddish, but I'm real interested now in Yiddish prose fiction, and I've written a piece now about about Yiddish prose fiction from the earliest, from the early 19th century to up to the present. Of course, not so much as being written anymore, you know, got cut off at the root. But I love the language. I love to hear it, the Mamaloshin, you know, and actually, like, you know, being here and in a kind of a Yiddish environment for a few days, you know, it picks up my spirits, and, you know, I start singing songs like Romania, Romania, and it's a great favorite. Gewinna mola landa, zise a feine, you know.
Do you want to sing Romania, Romania now?
I can't. My chops are gone. I would like to, but I don't want to make any more of a fool of myself than I'm doing now, you know.
That would be on YouTube real quick, I think. Yiddish YouTube. Etgar, is your Mama Lashon Hebrew?
Yeah, my first language is Hebrew. You know, my parents are both from Polish descent. My father's first language was Yiddish. My mother's first language was Polish, but he also spoke Polish and she also spoke Yiddish. But coming to Israel and kind of going with this kind of Zionistic plan, they didn't speak Yiddish to us. They just spoke Yiddish between themselves when they didn't want us to understand. It was like kind of this secret language.
There was a movement in the 19th century. Was the Haskalah? Was that it? You know, where they wanted these guys who were sort of like, some of them were like philosophers and stuff, and they looked forward to the formation of a new Jewish state, and they also thought that Hebrew, not Yiddish, was the language they could speak. They made some nasty comments about Yiddish, like that it was just a jargon. It wasn't a real language. Well, I don't know. I mean, I just feel good when I hear it, that's all. I mean, and you know, they had a big conference about it in Chernovitz in 1907 or something like that, where some of the Yiddish writers were trying to get it to be called the main Jewish language, but they couldn't get that. All they were given was that the conference decided that it should be called a Jewish language.
Little known story in the conflict between Yiddish and Hebrew.
Yeah. But I think one thing that they have in similar is that both of them are not typical languages, because usually, and I'm speaking now about the colloquial speech, you know, not about the written language, that most of the colloquial speeches in countries kind of developed organically through the years, you know, and so the language kind of grew up like a tree, and the Yiddish has its own strange story, but you know, this kind of mixture of a lot of languages and its root in the Hebrew, but kind of assimilating in Europe. And colloquial Hebrew also has an amazing story, and that's why it always attracted me to write in colloquial Hebrew, because colloquial Hebrew, basically you have this language that was kind of deep frozen for 2,000 years, existing only as a written language but not as a spoken language. And then like one certain moment, somebody kind of defrosted it in the big microwave of history, and people started speaking it. And the thing was that when they started speaking it, they kind of had the kind of a 2,000 years worth of words that they needed. Because, you know, Abraham never texted or used, Isaac didn't use GPS, and Jacob never faxed. So they needed all of this stuff kind of to deal with. And basically you had this kind of strange creature that was a language that was maybe one of the most, if not the most, ancient spoken language, which means that, you know, if Abraham would go to a room and listen to two taxi guys arguing about the rides they took, he would understand about 70 or 80% of what they were saying because they were using biblical words. But at the same time, this kind of very conservative, old and religious language was also an extremely chaotic and flexible language, which assimilated words from other languages and allowed people to invent new words. So when I talk to people about the colloquial speech in Hebrew, which I think it really presents the Israeli identity of a country that is both kind of ancient and young and both extremely conservative and religious and extremely liberal and chaotic, then I always say that when Israel is kind of, when they say goodbye to each other, they say Tov Yalla Bye, which is 3 words. Now, Tov is good, but it's basically one of the most ancient biblical words because when Adam and Eve ate from the apple, they learned to differentiate Tov Vera, like good and evil. So it's a very, very ancient Hebrew word. Yalla is basically vamos in Arabic, and bye is English. So this is like one of the most common colloquial Hebrew terms. Tov Yalla Bye basically is constructed of 3 words, each representing maybe one of the 3 strongest existing monotheistic religion, you know, and people who talk that they think that they speak Hebrew. And I think that in Yiddish you have something very, very similar, that basically you talk those sentences very nonchalantly, but those sentences tell a story of people being taken away from their home country and being sent to someplace else. And there is something about this kind of stories that kind of adds to, let's say, to the flavor and the juiciness of a language, and this kind of flavor and juiciness that you won't have in a language that kind of develops organically. It's kind of like, I don't know, stir frying a language, you know, it kind of gives you this kind of a, let's say in Hebrew, and also in Yiddish, the amazing thing is, let's say, this kind of the ways that you basically constantly move between registers, because you speak kind of a biblical language in both languages, and then you speak something that is completely slangish, and then you return to this kind of a very high biblical language. So it's kind of like a roller coaster ride between registers, and that's all the time while you're just buying a cigarette at the kiosk, you're moving between kind of 20 registers. And I know that from my translators that when they try to translate my language, basically, you know, when they email me, they actually, I send them a story, they say, I really liked it. Up, ? Which means, should we get all the register up or should we get all the register down? Because you can translate a story in English that will be half the King James Bible and half a 50-cent rap song, you know. You have to choose between them. While those languages, Yiddish and Hebrew, they don't choose. They just kind of flow through them, and it's the most natural things for the speakers.
Thank you. That was great. I thought, why don't we change registers also, or change genres, or we have some film clips. So why don't you tell us what we're going to see, then the 3 of us will sit down, and then we'll come back up and we'll finish our conversation.
Well, you know, it's basically what we're going to see is the second one here. Yeah, the $9.99. It's a Israeli-Australian co-production, which is basically means it's like 2 Israelis figuring out how to get money out of Australians to shoot a claymation feature film. And it's a claymation feature film based on 6 of my short stories, which I co-written with Tatia Rosenthal. the director, what we're going to see is the opening scene, and I must say that kind of thinking about this Hebrew and Yiddish connection, and there is something that I once had to define as he gave me this kind of interview assignment that I have to define my work in a limited number of words. So he said, what are your stories? And what I came up with that they were agnostic Hasidic tales. So I think that the opening scene of $9.99 is kind of one of those agnostic Hasidic tales, and it kind of established the feature film's premise. So you can see that.
And then tell us the second one too.
The second one too. So the second one is the last one, the bottom one, and it's basically this time it's about two Israelis getting money from the UN. So we're very good at kind of creating teams that we work. But the UN, they wanted to celebrate an anniversary for the Declaration of Human Rights. So they basically picked 24 directors from 24 countries, and they asked each to make a short movie about an issue that has to do with human rights. And basically, the way that it always is with the UN, the whole idea about it is that all those countries are able to sit together because they don't say anything meaningful and they don't piss each other off. So when my wife and I, Shira Geffen, we wanted to make our short movie that it would be in a checkpoint, they were completely scared because they knew that it would either piss the Israeli representative in the UN or the Arab representative in the UN, but so they made us sign this kind of thing. We had to go through about 20 different conditions that we had to keep, and they also had the ability to pull the film kind of and not shoot it, but we stuck with our original checkpoint idea, and that's the second clip we're going to see.
Sure. So we'll sit and then we'll come back on after.
Taxi! Taxi!
Excuse me, do you have a light? And an extra cigarette? Thanks. There's nothing like a morning cigarette. Coffee and cigarette. You wouldn't believe this dream I had. I dreamt I was back home with the missus and I'm sitting in the kitchen next to her.
Taxi!
Drinking my coffee. Smoking this.
1752, pick up at the airport.
And the missus says, Bunny, why don't you stay home from work today? We'll be together, just the two of us, like this. She's not alive anymore, but a coffee would be nice, just like in the dream.
Oh, listen, you can have all my money. I only have 15.
Hey!
If it's not enough, I'll go with you to an ATM, but please don't kill me. I have 2 children.
Man, relax. I was just gonna ask you for $1 for coffee. I wasn't robbing you. This isn't even mine.
Oh. So, may I ask whose it is?
I don't know. I found it under my cardboard this morning.
You scared the shit out of me.
So? How about it, sir? Would you give me $1 for a cup of coffee?
Oh, so that's your drill. You scare the shit out of people, and then they're so grateful you're not really robbing them that they give you the money.
Mate, you got it all wrong.
Wrong, huh? So why the hell did you take that gun?
Actually, I thought to myself I'd ask the first person I saw for a coffee and a cigarette.
And if that person said no?
Then I might as well join the missus. So, how about that coffee?
Or what? You'll shoot yourself? You know, in my field, you see a lot of manipulation. But you're the king.
Is that a yes?
What you're doing here is completely unfair. If you have to shoot yourself, it's tragic, but it has nothing to do with me. You hear? I'm not responsible.
You're absolutely right.
Here's what we're going to do. You're going to put the gun down and ask for that buck like a normal, homeless person. And I'll answer what I answer with no connection to your situation or this gun or anything else.
Okay.
Okay, what?
Would you please give me $1 for a cup of coffee?
I'm sorry. If I give you the money, I'll feel manipulated. I'm just gonna go now, okay?
Okay.
Maybe tomorrow.
Thank you, anyway.
You're welcome.
תעודות. צהובות לא עוברות, הן רק סגולות.
מה זה משנה? צהובות, סגולות? יש לי סחורה להעביר. אנשים מחכים לי.
מה יש לך שם?
בננות.
אני מצטער, אתה לא עובר. צהובות לא עוברות.
ואני?
איזה תעודה יש לך?
סגולה, בעוקף, בכיס הימני.
יאללה, דיו!
מה דיו? זה החמור שלי!
אל תדאג, נאסר. עד מחר ב-10 אני כאן.
מה ב-10?
טוב, 9:30.
יאללה, זוז כבר. תן גז. ברא.
אין לך לב? ככה להפריד מישהו מהחמור שלו?
צהובות לא עוברות.
תן לי לעבור.
צהובות לא עוברות!
תן לי לעבור.
נמרן, מה קורה פה?
לא יודע. הערבי הזה התחרפן קצת.
עוד ערבי התחרפן.
שייתן לי לעבור.
וואלה.
כן.
לוגסי, קיגלר, חיימון, תגלגלו את עצמכם לרכב, אתם יוצאים שבת.
ואני?
מישהו צריך להישאר כאן, לא? אם הוא ממשיך להשתולל, תן לו קטנה עם הקייט.
ואני?
אתה? בסדר, אבל לקצרה. יום ראשון 7 שפיץ אתה פה.
כן, בוס.
ותתרחץ קצת, מסריח לי עד כאן.
מוקי! יש לך אש?
אני לא מעשן.
עוד בננה?
אין. החמור לקח.
All right, we're going to talk film for a little bit, then we're going to open it up to questions, and then have cookies. So, Harvey, you're kind of like intermittently extremely famous. You know, I'm thinking about the kind of the multiple Letterman appearances, some which are among the top 7 or 8 Letterman appearances in history in the 80s, 90s. If I remember correctly, and then this film came out 5-6 years ago. So I imagine the question you get is, you know, did that change your life in any way? Did this film change your life?
The film changed my life, yeah. The Letterman appearances didn't change my life because I didn't make any money on it. I didn't sell any, you know, books or anything like that, which was the object of going on a show. So I just figured I would make a commotion and go out in a blaze of glory. So that's one thing. Now, the movie, I thought if I was on Letterman's show, millions of people were watching me. I had no evidence that even one bought a comic book from me. That the show was a waste, you know? So I decided that, you know, I would get off of it some kind of way, you know, in an entertaining way that, you know, but, you know, just maybe looking a little heroic too, you know. So, yeah. Let's see, what was the second part of your question?
Do you hang out with Paul and Hope?
Yeah, what, Paul?
Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, Giamatti, yeah.
Giamatti, yeah.
No, I mean, we used to be, you know, pretty close, but as time went on, we sort of, you know how it is if you don't live in the same city with somebody, you know, you separate. He's just a hell of an actor. Yeah. He's a real good actor, and I'm real happy that he seemed to get this movie seemed to get him a break. Because, you know, I mean, before they thought, you know, he wasn't good looking enough to be a leading man. And since then, he's been, you know, leading man all the time. Toby, no, I don't talk to, you know, once in a while I'll talk to Toby or something, but, you know, he lives on the other side of town now and stuff. What can you do?
Etgar, do you have any goals or pretensions to go Hollywood?
You know, I think that when you want to do something, you just want to do that thing, you know, so it's like kind of, many times people ask me, would you like to write a novel, or you say, would you like to go to Hollywood? And basically, what I like to do is tell stories, so you know, so maybe one day I want to tell stories that you could only tell with Hollywood money, and I'll be able to manipulate people enough to give me that money and kind of lose it, you know. But this is not a goal, you know. This could something that could happen on the way. But if I can make money, a movie for little money, then there's no point for me going to Hollywood, because the whole idea is that basically, let's say Jellyfish was a Israeli-European co-production. So in Israel, or most of the places in Europe, you don't have such a thing called a director's cut. It goes without saying that if you make a movie, then all the artistic decisions are yours. Basically, you know, you decide what the cast is, you decide how the film will look like, and I wouldn't understand how anybody would want to make a movie losing that power and gaining what? I don't know. Like I'm saying, what is the upside of letting kind of studios and producers take decisions that are artistic decisions? I don't know. It's like, what? Well, distribution, yeah, but for me, what I feel is like, I'm saying, even when I take my own decision, there is this huge chance that it will come out a crappy movie. What chance do I have of making a good movie with me and a bunch of people who are completely outside to the way that I think taking those decision. So maybe I win distribution, but if I make a crappy film, nobody will come and see it, you know. So I think it's hard enough, kind of. I'm saying if I would say, man, like I feel omnipotent, I can make this amazing movie, doesn't matter what, then if I feel confident enough, maybe I would have wanted to do it kind of in a Hollywood system. But with me, I think it's really I'm clinging there, you know, with my fingernails, you know. So I don't need people kind of hanging on my feet, you know, and making things even harder.
Let's open things up to questions. I think that, are we using this mic for questions?
I wanted to ask you both about the relationship between Harvey Pekar, the character in the comics, and yourself, and Etgar, your relatively new character called Etgar Keret in your new series of stories, and yourself.
You want to start off?
Okay, well, with me, I've written only 2 stories like this. Basically, in my new collection, the stories that I've read is kind of like the prologue, and there is another story which is the epilogue. And the story which is the epilogue, it really tells a true story that this German TV crew, they came to shoot something for German TV, which was supposed to help me promote my book there. And when they shot in my apartment, there's something very kind of contrived about this thing. Like, let's say, they say, my kid comes home, you know, and he runs and hugs me. And the German TV director says, oh, that was beautiful, but we didn't catch it. Can he run and hug you again? So there was something very kind of awkward about this entire situation. And then at some stage they said, you know, because you're a writer, we want you to sit by a computer and kind of pretend you write. So I sat by the computer. Now I always want to make people happy, you know. I think people that are about my size, they try to avoid confrontations, you know. So I was kind of sitting by the computer pretending that I'm writing, you know, kind of pushing those random letters. And then the director said, it's not good, because when we look at the monitor, we can see that you're not writing. So I said to him, what do you want me to do? So he said, how about you write a real story, and we shoot you while you write this real story, and then it will come out great. And I said to him, but I can't write a real story with German crew, you know, I'm saying with any crew, but especially with German crew, being second generation, you know, kind of, and with the kind of light in my face, and this guy with the boom. And he says, no, but you know, but that's art, you have to use it, use all those kind of, and I said, sure, okay, you know, and I sat down and I wrote this story. And the funny thing about it is that at some stage, when I almost finished the first draft, I kind of looked around me and I see that they were gone. Because they were kind of shooting it, and then they finished. I guess they tried to talk to me, but I was kind of too into writing. And so this is kind of like the ending story. But there is something about those 2 stories that what I really think is that factually, both of them, they are full of incorrect facts. You know, like no Swedish guy put a gun to my head. But I think in a way, they are kind of a way of telling things that I really believe. You know, I'm saying, if the stories that I've read, I guess it's a story about kind of a writer block, or this yearning to write, or this yearning kind of to be, like, let's say, what I feel is there's something very kind of Kantian about writing, that, you know, Immanuel Kant always said, like, that if you do a good thing, like, if you do something, you can't do it and kind of exploit what you're doing. Like, I'm saying, if I do a good deed, just so people will look at me and think I'm good and girls would want to go out with me, then it's not a good thing. So I think that there is something the same about fiction, that, let's say, if I just sit and say, I want to write a story and I want to be amazing and I want people to love me because of that story, you can't write a story this way. So I think that there is something about this kind of story, about this kind of intrinsic tension between this kind of like ego pushed, greedy side of trying to write, and the true nature of a story is that can only come when you give up on that greedy side. You kind of have to let go. So I guess in that sense, you know, this is a true biographical story, but what happens in it is not neither true nor biographical.
just as long as you mention Kant or Descartes or something. It's the first time that anyone's used the word Kant on the stage. That's fantastic.
Well, especially with my Hebrew, I think, accent, when I say Kant, it sounds dirty, you know?
You know what Wittgenstein said about comics?
He was a Kant too.
I don't know.
I don't know. The question was about the relationship between.
What's the you, the Harvey Pekar that's on the paper? How close is that to the real you?
Yeah, right. That's what I thought. Okay. Yeah, it's very often it's as close as I can make it, because I want people to identify with me, and I think if I show myself in a realistic way, they will. I want them to think, oh yeah, that happened to me, and so I'm happy to see someone else is screwed up like I am, So but once in a while I'll think of a good joke or something that I really didn't say, or I don't know. I'll throw it in there. I don't want to waste it.
Art rears its ugly head.
That's right.
Let's have some more questions.
Hello. Point of clarification. You had said something earlier about American Splendor being the first graphic novel. Not true. Are you both of you familiar with the work of Will Eisner and his work?
Are you familiar with the work of Robert Crumb in 1962 when he did something 15 years before Eisner?
1962 was not 15 years before Eisner.
Well, I don't know when it was. When Eisner had, what are you referring to?
Well, he wrote a piece called A Contract with God, and it was...
That's not the first graphic novel. I don't know how far graphic novels go back, but they don't go back. But they, 1979, there was other stuff out by then. I saw Crumb write this, R. Crumb's Big Yum Yum book in 1962, and it was published finally in 1965. And that, it's not a series of short stories, like Eisner, did.
Well,
Eisner's, he's I give him a lot of credit, but I think people give him too much credit. Okay, I'll be sorry I said that sometime.
No, that's okay. Go for it, Harvey.
That's the way I feel about it.
Well,
People gotta worship somebody now.
Eisner is well known for the Contract with God trilogy in the late 70s, and I don't know in terms of what was published when exactly, but American Splendor and Contract with God were around the same time, and there was other stuff that was happening.
I didn't publish the first. I never claimed to publishing.
No, I know you didn't. I didn't say you did. You were introduced as such. That's all.
All right.
I love your work, Harvey. It's all right.
It's his fault. It has nothing to do with you. It's his fault.
I thought I was slightly more nuanced than it came out.
Okay, it's all right. It's all right.
We can agree that you are a major innovator of the form.
Yeah, we can agree.
Can we agree on that? Okay.
Let's hear it for me.
Yeah, rock on. Okay, today's Harvey Pekar Day in San Francisco. Any other questions? Boy, that was almost Talmudic.
I'm curious for both of you. What do you guys read? Like blogs, newspaper, books, novels, what nonfiction, scientific articles? What do you guys read? And do you still read?
Do you read?
What do I read?
Do you read books? Do you read the paper?
Yeah, I mean, the main influence on my writing is prose fiction. It's certainly not comic book writing. Comic books are a fine art form, as good as any, but comic books are written for kids with the mentality of a school kid. You're not going to get your best writing in medium that's dominated by superheroes like Spider-Man. So,
I actually like Spider-Man. I like Spider-Man. Look,
you got a right to like Spider-Man. I mean, if you want to like Spider-Man, you know.
But what I want to say is that, like, you know, like you say, people think bad things about comics because some people write crap comic books, but actually some people write very good superhero comic books. Like, let's say, like The Watchmen, you know. So
yeah. First, that's Alan Moore's book. Yeah, I know Alan.
But what I'm saying is that, let's say, when Alan Moore wrote The Swamp Thing, which was the trashiest, worst comic book, when he wrote it, it suddenly became interesting and nice. So I'm saying even superheroes or even mainstream comics from time to time can suddenly do something nice by mistake. You know, when somebody was sleeping on his god, and this talent came in. So I'm saying you can write a good Batman story, you can write a good Superman story. Theoretically, you can write anything.
Anything is possible, but it just doesn't happen that often.
No, it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen.
Well, once in a while it happens. Moore's an exceptional guy.
Yeah.
And but there aren't too many Alan Moores running around that can make a silk purse out of a sow's ear.
No, but there's something.
A little folk wisdom there. Yeah.
I think this is something really interesting because you know, it's kind of sometimes in this mainstream comic world, there are those guys that they make a living by writing those crappy stuff for retarded kids, you know, and they get bored of it, and they do this kind of subversive stuff. Like people, I don't know, starting to do subversive stuff in their office, and it's really amazing how in this kind of this kind of system that is so full of constraints, they're able to kind of show talent too, which is something kind of, I think, that inspiring, because it means that it doesn't matter where they put you. You know, you could write menus for McDonald's and you can do wonderful things in it.
Yeah, when's the last time you saw a wonderful McDonald's menu?
No, I'm not saying that it was done, but I'm saying that maybe if the two of us will put our heads to it, maybe we can do something out of it. And I'm a vegetarian.
Bring me a contract, man. We'll look at it. We'll see what happens.
And so, what are you guys reading?
Oh, well, I read.
Prose.
You know, I read. I had set up a reading program for myself in the 1980s. I wanted to acquaint myself with as much prose fiction as I possibly could. So what I would do would be I would take histories of literature in particular countries, in particular eras, and I would find out who were considered the best writers, and I would read them. I would go country by country and era by era. And so I read, tons of, so-called classic kind of writers. And I got using that program, I got a pretty good background, and relatively speaking, anyway, in what I really wanted to get into, which was prose fiction.
So, what can you give us? Who is the writer that has stuck with you, or one of them that stuck with you the most, and what is one that you think is the most overrated?
Well, the guys I like a lot. I like James Joyce. And I like, Dostoevsky, and I like Balzac, and I like Flaubert. There's just a million guys. There's so many good writers out there. So many good writers. Overrated. I'm sure I
pick someone dead. You won't get into as much trouble.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think. I'm just trying to think. I'm not getting worked up over anybody being overrated these days. Come back tomorrow.
Okay, that's great. I'll ask you again tomorrow.
Well, I like and was very influenced by Kafka's work and by actually Yiddish writers like Shalom Aleichem and Bashevis Singer. I really liked Isaac Babel. Overrated? My number one for overrated is Proust. I think this guy is really is a self-centered, self-indulged, spoiled French kid who really was extremely talented. But there is something about me when I read somebody. I think that the thing that I'm really attracted to is, let's say, sincerity, and and kind of being some sort of a mensch, in one way or another. And with Proust, I'm not saying that he's not sincere, but it's kind of like when you read his stuff, all the time you have a feeling that you have this kind of peacock who tries to impress you and get you to bed. It's like, I just don't get it. I know that that he's kind of, many people love him, but I just don't get it.
What did you say about, you like Isaac Bashevis Singer?
Yeah, I do.
You do? Okay.
You like him too? Oh, you were about to hit me. I gave the good answer, right?
I don't like his writing.
I don't.
I like his brother's writing better. I.J. Singer.
I never read it. I should
read. Well, I think that the brothers Ashkenazi are better than that book is better than by far than anything I.B. Singer wrote. I think I.B. Singer is kind of like a popularizer, and he's a romanticist and all that, but I don't find much substance in his work. Maybe I'm crazy.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Art Spiegelman's Mouse, I think, was one of the most powerful of anything I've ever read in my short life. And I was wondering, what do you think, in your works, do you find that your illustrated works are more impactful to your readers, or your just pure literary works?
Well, I'm saying, I think the readers know what the readers feel, but for me, I think the thing that is most fundamental for me, is it's really writing fiction. I love kind of doing comics, and I love doing films, but I love doing them because of the collaborative effect, and I think that sometimes, the collaborative effect kind of helps me kind of broaden my thought and kind of go to places that I won't go any other way. But if I had to kind of pick one thing that I have to stick with, it would be my fiction.
I was pleasantly surprised to hear your stories, Etgar, on This American Life. Can you tell a little bit about how that collaboration started?
Well, Ira Glass came to Israel to do some piece about Israel, and I gave him one of my books in translation, just for the airplane, and they had a show a few weeks after that, and he just kind of asked if he could use one of the stories. And in the beginning they wanted me to read it, but then they heard me read, and they said, maybe it's better we take an actor,
Who's the actor?
Meloni, I think it's Mike Meloni, I think, but I'm not sure.
I think that I saw one hand up in the back. Maybe that'll be our last question.
I have a question about translation. I find when I read you in translation, Etgar Keret, that your stories are somewhat flat, but when I read them in Hebrew, there's an intimacy that is just amazing. And I'm not sure if it's because of the language itself or because, excuse me, that it's so difficult for me to read it that I have to work so hard. So I'm wondering, when your works are translated, if you know the language, presumably English and maybe others, do you also work with the translators?
Well, my two English translators, Miriam Schlesinger and Sandra Silverstone, they are like they're friends. So I try to work with them. I must say that I really don't have any sensitivities for subtleties in English. Like, I know how to ask people how to get to the train station, but I really can't figure out what feels natural and what doesn't. I think that there's something really ingrateful in, or let's say depressing in translation to begin with. Israel's national poet, Chaim Nachman Bialik, said once that reading a work in translation is like kissing somebody through a handkerchief. And there's something true about this kind of feeling of mediation. And I think that, again, since writing can be so frustrating to begin with, because you try to write a story and the story doesn't come out the way you want it. I said earlier today in another event, that I feel that basically it's kind of, it's a translation of a translation of a translation, because basically you have an emotion or a thought, and then you turn it into a sentence, and then you turn it into a story, and then people translate it. So it's just another step removed. It kind of you keep distancing it from your original intent, and really, and I think that when we read something in translation, we have this kind of presuppositions that languages act the same, you know, that basically that the reality that you see or feel through the English language is the same ones that you feel through colloquial Hebrew language. And it's just not true. You know, many times when my translators approach me, they have these kind of inherent problems that we ask me, what can we do with it? And I really don't have an answer. You know, I really say to them, I don't know, like, how about we translate another story instead? You know, because I just don't even have an idea how to begin solving them.